There's a great example in Parshat Vaera of how Parshanut, which is the term for rabbinic commentary on the Torah, can exist on one of two levels: the broad, macro, large scale, ideological, theological, teaches big ideas, or on the small scale, very narrow, detail oriented. It can seem even mundane, figuring out small discrepancies in different verses. And sometimes one verse or phrase can give rise to both or either of these levels. So we're in Parshat Vaera, Shmot, Exodus chapter 8, verse 15, the third plague, which is the plague of lice. The first two plagues, Dam and Tzfardea, the blood, which is the Nile River turning to blood, and Tzfardea, frogs that infested the land of Egypt. After both of those two first plagues, which were enacted or brought on by Aaron, the Egyptian sorcerers are able to replicate those plagues themselves. The Torah both times tells us, Vaya'asu chen. They too did that. But now in the third plague of kinim, of lice, the lice infestation, the sorcerers are unable to do that. It says, Vayusuchen hachartumim balatehen. The sorcerers tried to do that with their staffs, velo yacholu, but they were unable to. So now in our verse 15, Vayomru achartumim el paro, the sorcerers say to Pharaoh, Etzba Elokim hi. This, the lice infestation, is the finger of God. But Pharaoh does not listen to them, hardens his heart, velo shama alehem, and did not listen to them. So what is this phrase that the sorcerers say to Pharaoh, that this is the finger of God? First, let's look at Rashi. Rashi, the classic commentator on the page, says, Etzba Elokim hi, it's the finger of God, makezu eno al yedei kshafim. This plague, as opposed to the first two, is from God, and it's not an act just of sorcery. Now, there's a general looming question here, which we're not going to get into, which is, does the Torah seem to understand that there's sort of supernatural potential which comes from God, and then a separate supernatural potential which can come from magic or sorcery? This Rashi seems to imply that at least the sorcerers believed that, certainly. And so now the sorcerers are saying, this third plague is from God. It's not voodoo. We're here in New Orleans, so it's not voodoo that Aaron and Moshe were able to do and we were able to do. This is from God. This is separate. Me'et hamakom hi. It's from God. It's divine. That is how Rashi, based on earlier midrashim, that's what Rashi offers. But there's other directions that different parshanim, different rabbinic commentators take on this term. One is to contrast it. First, let's quote from a Gemara. The Gemara in Sanhedrin notes, and this is the midrash that the Torah Temimah brings, Etzba Elokim hi, this is the finger of God, hi etzba ha'atida lihipareya misancheriv. This is the finger of God which in the future will extract retribution from Sancheriv, who is the king of Assyria. The king of Assyria who launched attacks and conquests against the land of Israel and was ultimately killed. And there, when it mentions the death of Sancheriv, it mentions that he was struck down there too by the finger of God. So it could be, the Torah Temimah here says, Yitachen dayek midaloktiv etzba elokim zu. From the fact that the Torah doesn't say this is the finger of God, but rather it is the finger of God, it seems to indicate that this is a finger of God that is referenced elsewhere. So that's why the Gemara in Sanhedrin claims that it's a reference to Sancheriv, which is a which is something that historically won't happen for 1,000 years in the future. But now let's look at something else that the rabbinic commentators will do with this phrase of God's finger. One thing to note is that by a different plague, the plague of Dever, which is that of the plague, which affects the livestock, kills all the Egyptian livestock, there, which it takes place in Exodus chapter 9, verse 3, the phraseology is different. There it says, Hine Yad Hashem hoya b'miknecha. Here, the hand of God will be upon your livestock. So why is it that here by lice it says the finger of God, but elsewhere, with respect to the plague of Dever, it is called the hand of God? The Zohar says, this is a very nice idea, that livestock is broken down into 5 categories. Indeed, the conclusion of that verse we just quoted lists the 5 categories. Susim, chamurim, gamalim, horses, donkeys, camels, bakar, uvatzon, cattle, and flocks of sheep. Those are 5. And we know that there's 5 fingers in a hand. So claims the Zohar, why is it that the plague of the plague or pestilence which hits the livestock is called the hand of God? Because the hand has 5 fingers. So it's like 5 individual plagues hitting those 5 categories. Very nice idea. The Torah Temimah, our go-to in this series, says a little differently, and we'll read him now. Hine, mashma mikan de bechlal laku b'mitzrayim be'etzba. Generally speaking, all the plagues took place with God's finger, symbolically. V'chein katav bala Haggadah, and that's what we say during Passover when we read from the Haggadah during the Seder. Kama laku be'etzba. How great, how much were the Egyptians afflicted with the finger? So now the Torah Temimah asks the same question as the Zohar. V'yesh laha'ir mash b'makat dever k'tiv hina yad Hashem hoya b'miknecha. So how can it be that regarding the plague of pestilence it says it's the hand of God and not the finger of God? Harei shalaku b'yad. That seems to be that in Dever God struck with a hand, not a finger. V'efshar lomar. So here's the Torah Temimah's answer. Hakavana dekol makeh laku be'etzba achat. We can say that really every plague was indeed just done with one finger. V'imkein b'makat dever shehi hamaka chamishit. But dever is the 5th plague. Hare laku kvar b'chamesh etzbaot, meaning God already struck with 5 fingers. L'chein k'tiv ba yad, and that's why it says hands. Hakolelet chamesh etzbaot, which includes 5 fingers. It's a very sweet, cute, and as I said at the very beginning, it's sort of a small answer. It's answering this question of why does it say finger in one place, hand in another place. Both the Zohar and the Torah Temimah give sort of small answers. One is that there's 5, the Zohar's answer is there's 5 categories of livestock, so 5 fingers equals a hand, and similarly the Torah Temimah says Dever is the 5th plague, 5 fingers equals a hand. So those are both very nice. And then we have the larger questions about, is it possible that according to the Egyptian mindset, this third plague of kinim, of lice, took place on a grander scale, was truly divine, it couldn't be replicated by humans, and as such it really it was a game changer in the eyes of at least some Egyptians, that really these Israelites and their God are really all-powerful. And of course, Pharaoh was not yet ready to listen to that. Always a pleasure learning with you. See you next week.